It's over there at someone's house. Listen. There he is. Oh, here he comes.
All right, we're going to call our meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. That was a good one, Dave. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I got this out of your closet.
Ain't no problem.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Roll call. All board members are present except for Sue, who I understand is coming. We do have proper notification of an open meeting. First action item is recommendation to approve the minutes of the November 13th, 2019 regular board meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Any question on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next action item is a resolution to approve the bill list.
I'll make a motion to approve the bill list.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion, a second. Any question on the bill list? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is communication and comments from members of the public. Okay. All right. We have a couple people that want to speak, but before we allow that, we just have to share what the rules of the school board are in regards to public communications. Anyone wishing to speak to the board must register on the sign-up form, which we have here. So if anybody that came late, if they want to get on here. A 3-minute time limit is enforced. Public comment is only accepted during this agenda item. Sharing of minutes with another person addressing the board is not permitted. Speakers should address the board as a whole, not individual board members, and should remain polite and respectful. Only the board president may respond to comments or questions. He or she has the authority to ask another board member or administrator to respond. Board members will not respond to public comments unless designated by the board president. The board president has the authority to cease any conversation at any time for any reason. Public comments will be taken under advisement. If public comments are in regard to an agenda item, when the board discusses that particular item during the meeting, the board may or may not address the comments or questions raised by the public. And finally, only the board will discuss and or take action. There will be no public communications during the time of agenda topics. So, does anybody else need to sign? You're all good? Okay. Emma? Step on up.
Yeah. Good.
Hello all, my name is Emma Vorpega. I'm a junior at Arrowhead. I run cross country and track in addition to a set of difficult classes. I was inspired to first advocate for this thing that I'll be talking about today when I had to write a letter in composition. After it was initially turned down, I realized that I had a passion to try and take it further. Arrowhead has always prided itself on being ahead of other schools. However, there is one thing we are desperately behind on. We have so many students who excel both academically and athletically, who are burdened by taking 3 semesters worth of gym. Wisconsin law allows schools to substitute athletic extracurriculars for gym credits. We believe students at Arrowhead would greatly benefit from this policy. Take for instance Ruthie Lynn, a senior who runs cross country and track along with extremely rigorous course load and various other extracurriculars, including being the president of National Honor Society. Ruthie remarks that gym class presents a hassle to me, as I do not have time during the school day to take it. Therefore, I am in AM gym, which requires me to wake up at 5:30 a.m. every morning. Because I am also in a sport almost year-round and am taking academically challenging classes, 5 AP classes and 2 math classes at Carroll, I have so much to do, and therefore I go to bed very late. During the sports season, I go to bed on average at 2 to 2:30 a.m. This means I get around 3.5 or 3 hours of sleep for an entire sports season. Clearly this is not healthy. Because I have morning gym, I must wake up earlier, costing me sleep and sanity. Overall, I feel like I am already a very active person, and gym is not helping me or teaching me anything. My life would be better without gym, and I'm sure many other athletes in the same boat as me would agree. Ruthie is correct that many athletes believe their lives would be better without gym. In a poll we sent out, to which over 200 students responded, 94.5% of them said that they believe that athletes should be exempt from 1 semester of gym class. In addition, coaches and teachers alike believe this measure would be beneficial for their student athletes. Surrounding schools have successfully implemented this policy and found it to be beneficial to their student body. Overall, instituting a policy that would reduce gym requirements for those in sports is a popular move that would undoubtedly be beneficial to the student body. We understand that there are a lot of gray areas in this issue, and that implementation of this policy could be a long and difficult process. However, we believe it is worth it and are willing to invest the time and to help advance this proposition. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Emma. All right, Greg. Yeah, Greg?
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name's Greg Matlin, and I just here this evening just to support your district and introduce myself. I work for a company called SFE, Southwest Food Service Excellence, and we provide food service for K-12 food districts. So I had some emails with Jeff, and I know mainly I'll work with him. And a friend of mine, Ryan Magnan, is here at the high school, so I stopped in last week and spent an hour with him, which was really good because we used to play softball together back in Madison. But for those of you that don't, Southwest Food Service Excellence, or SFE, we're fairly new to Wisconsin. We're in Hortonville and 3 other small districts in Milwaukee, but our headquarters is out of Phoenix, Arizona, and we've had tremendous growth over the last 15 years. So we're now in 170 school districts in 15 states, and part of my job is just getting out and kind of spreading the word and telling about all the good things that we're doing. Ultimately, would work with people like Jeff and go through the state for the RFP process. But me, I came from engineering, technology, innovation, so this is a brand new industry for me. But part of the reasons I joined them is just because they really wanted somebody with Wisconsin ties, and having grown up in Stevens Point, live in Madison, having gone to school in Madison, have a lot of connections. I do a lot of stuff with Try for Schools, which is kids triathlons, and the Boys and Girls Club. And really, I can reach out to you if you have any questions. You can get hold of Jeff, and I'd be happy to email you info. And part of my goal is just making sure that you guys know we exist. So I appreciate you listening. Thanks.
Thank you.
I forgot to smile, so I'll stop.
Smile at the cameras that way.
Oh boy.
Anna. Anna?
All right, hi, I'm Anna Pease. I'm also a junior at Arrowhead, and I'm also here to talk about the student PE issue. And so I also participate in track and cross country, and so this issue is important to me and it means a lot. So one of the main points that people have given us for not implementing the policy of allowing students to substitute a sport for a PE class is that there's fear that the measure could be discriminatory. However, this is demonstratively false, as several schools in the area, such as Hamilton and Waukesha South, have actually followed a policy like this without facing legal recourse. In addition, for students that have difficulty making a sports team, Arrowhead offers many no-cut sports such as cross-country, track, ski, wrestling, cheer, and swim. And coaches for these teams have noted that they would be happy to accommodate students with any sort of disability, be it physical, mental, or emotional. As athletes, we have all seen people compete, and we believe that inclusion is paramount to a sports experience. We have additional student testimonies, so you can see that other people agree with our points too. In the poll that we sent out, one student responded and said, the main purpose of mandatory physical education courses was to ensure that students, while achieving academically, were not neglecting their physical health. However, increasing participation in a multitude of athletic extracurricular events available, many of which have no limitation as to who can participate, the number of students truly in need of physical education as a class is dwindling. Athletics that students participate in often include exercises much more strenuous than those done in PE classes and can be extremely rigorous, lasting more than an hour a day. Consequently, the broad 3-credit requirement for all students doesn't seem to be universally applicable anymore. Nevertheless, students who choose not to participate in these activities and are otherwise generally sedentary can benefit from a PE credit, which is why we don't think it does apply to everyone. On the other hand, those lacking athletic activities may very well benefit from PE courses. However, those already participating in sports really won't benefit that much because they're already participating in athletics that are much more rigorous than they would be experiencing in a PE class. And doubling up on those can actually be harmful rather than beneficial. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, superintendent's report.
The first item planned for the superintendent report was going to be a review and celebration of fall season activities and athletics from Mr. Mangan, our activities and athletic director. However, his mother passed away last week, and so he was out for several days. He just came back to work today, and so there were many more timely issues for him to deal with today rather than writing a report for the board. So I with confidence, I told him you'd be happy to hear that report next meeting on January 8th rather than tonight. So then we will move to the next part of my report, which is oh so exciting. It's an opportunity to discuss the safety drill, the school safety drill report. When Act 143 went into place about a year ago, which is a law that deals with school safety, one of the law requirements was for school districts to hold a crisis drill related to the potential of a violent intruder. Arrowhead had actually done this before the law was required, but now that law requires a report going to the board within 30 days of the execution of that drill. So the board actually received that report along with your board brief on November 6th. And then, so it was timely within the 30 days after the drill, but then we also need to give the board the opportunity to discuss that report. So I will review that report in just a moment. I just want to also remind the board that a year ago I gave a school safety report update, and that was much more lengthy. It wasn't just the report on the school safety drill, because it was when Act 143 went into place. So you may recall I gave an update on the fact that we had had a safety plan in place for years before it was required, but we had the school board go into closed session, we reviewed that plan, and the board approved the plan. And that was submitted to the Department of Justice. I had reviewed at that time that there are particular staff trainings required, that we've been in compliance with those trainings. There also was a requirement to establish a threat assessment team at the school. We had a student support team in place that handled a lot of those same type of concerns, but we followed what the Department of Justice Office of School Safety requires. They actually use an FBI protocol. So our threat assessment team is our student support team, and we're in compliance with that. And then finally, instituting the annual school violence drill, which we had been doing already. So in terms of next steps, after we discuss that report tonight, I will complete the Office of School Safety 2019-2020 school year required checklist to certify that our district is in compliance with all of those rules and regulations. After that, the next time the school safety plan must be reviewed and approved by the school board is during the 2021-22 school year. So it's every 3 years the board needs to review and approve that plan. Rest assured, our administration, our school safety team, which is comprised of administrators and Waukesha County Sheriff's Department deputy, we review that school safety plan at least every summer, if not more frequently. If there were ever a plan change that was significant, each year we tweak it a little bit based on improvements that we've learned during the course of the year. But if anything significant changed, I wouldn't wait to bring it to the board. For another year or two, we can hold a closed session to review any significant changes earlier than that. So now if we go back to the school violence drill summary report, I have it linked in your agenda. I'm just going to touch on a few key points that perhaps you've already read. We always do training before the drill. So for instance, on August 28th, there was mandatory training for all faculty members. We had 3 members of the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department here to help run us through some semi-realistic scenarios, just to help prepare staff members for if a horrible crisis happened at Arrowhead, how would we handle that? The next training was on October 15th and 17th. These were additional optional training for staff members to help them prepare for the school violence drill. The date of our school violence drill was October 23rd. All students and staff members in school that day were participants. An overall summary of that drill, we don't simply, like a fire drill for instance, the alarm goes off and we all go outside. Quick drill. A school safety violent intruder drill is different. We start out and we actually treat it like an entire class period. It was a 40-minute period. We go through a lesson with the students and then they participate in a drill where over the PA system, our principal or an associate principal is pretending that there's a violent intruder somewhere in the building, and they'll say near the library or at the welcome center. And then it's up to the teacher and the students in each class to decide, should we be fleeing the building to be safe, or should we be locking down and taking cover in our classrooms? So we go through an actual drill process like that, and then after that drill, whether they leave the building or take cover in their classrooms in a lockdown, after that everyone gathers back in their classrooms for a debrief and the remainder of the lesson. This year the lesson changed from the prior 2 years in that we did not just use a training video and a discussion with the teacher that was about the drill itself. We also included a beginning part of the lesson that was all more about proactive practices to help a school climate, Arrowhead and any other school, to help a school climate be accepting, happy, a comfortable place for kids to be. If students feel they're accepted in their school climate, it's thought to be that that's more preventative, it's proactive, because you typically then don't have students that are angry at the school or at the world. So we have a lot of, I guess, responsive things in place to protect against school violence, but we also have many proactive things in place. And we wanted our students to talk about that. So if there's a student that seems to be a loner, what would we do? Now, just because you're a loner or shy doesn't mean you're murderous. But if there's someone that doesn't seem to be connecting, what would you do? How could you help that student? So that was woven in as part of our lesson this year. After the drill, the teachers talk with students about the drill. How did it go? They keep notes or mentally recall things that come up that may be new that we haven't considered. And we also put out a survey to our faculty members to ask, what did they experience during the drill? What went well? What could be improved? They share student thoughts as well. And so in your document, I shared some of those reflections. For instance, the training leading into the drill, that was considered helpful. A few teachers noted that students thought having a more realistic enactment, for instance, using an actor intruder with gunshots and blanks, could be beneficial to make it more realistic. On the other hand, there were students that said the opposite. It was realistic enough, and it made some students really nervous or very anxious just with the level at which we conducted the drill. We've changed our door handles, as you know. We invested greatly in being able to lock the doors with a simple push of the button and not needing to go in the hallway with a key. That was appreciated. There was feedback about that. One question that came up from several students and a staff member was about bathroom doors. Should bathroom doors be able to lock from the inside in case there's students in the hallway and there's a threat? They can't get into a classroom, for instance, and a bathroom is nearby. Should they be able to get in a bathroom and lock the door? Our research and even common sense would say that would not be best practice on a day-to-day basis to have a bathroom door that locks from the inside. The odds of being in a school shooting event in any given year is 1 in 615 million. The odds of a student hurting himself or another in a locked bathroom day in and day out is definitely more likely than an intruder coming in. So we have to consider those kind of things. In an intruder situation, it would be great to be able to quickly lock a bathroom door. Day to day, probably not a good idea to be able to, for students to lock themselves into our bathrooms. And finally, just some minor things, like we know that now we need to change our IT closet in the South Campus office. That's going to be used as a lockdown place for South Campus office staff. So we'll have an additional secure place to hide for some office folks. So that's a summary of the drill report, that we are now compliant with the law. The board doesn't have to approve the report, you just have to receive the report, and then we give you this opportunity to discuss or ask questions. If you care to discuss and ask questions, absolutely fine. If any of those questions would reach into topics that would be considered confidential, because some of our school safety plan is confidential, we wouldn't want to talk about it in public because it could jeopardize the safety of our school and students. If you have questions related to things like that, then we'd be happy to schedule a closed board session after the next January or February board meeting.
Okay.
Questions or comments on the report?
I think it was very well done, and I think that we're in a very good position at Arrowhead, and the amount of time, effort, and energy that went into that drill and to coordinate that all is pretty phenomenal. It's very impressive to see that we are advanced in that. And unfortunately, in today's day and age, we have to be.
Right.
But, very nice work.
Thanks for that feedback.
Yeah, like Dave said, I think with everything that's gone on, even locally, you always hear of things happening in Utah or Colorado or somewhere else. But we've had some locally that strikes home a lot closer. It can happen anywhere, not just some distant location. So I think it's very beneficial to be prepared. And I mean, from what I read that report and what we got last year, you've done a marvelous job of preparing, you and the staff done a marvelous job of preparing the students and coming up with a well thought out plan. Thank you.
It's a team effort, definitely, which includes students, the student help, the staff, and then our school safety team, which Adam is one of the co-leaders of that school safety team, so.
All right. Also kudos to our staff, obviously, with the stuff that happened in Waukesha and Oshkosh and some of the other local districts with threats. Our staff was right on top of trying to squelch rumors that were going either over social media or in the hallways. And you saw Laura's comments or information she passed on to us about trying to quell all that stuff. So that's part of that plan too, because you know that's a natural effect that's going to happen. That there's all the copycat stuff that can go on. So thank you for doing that. So, all right, anything else, Laura?
Oh, that's my report.
All right, committee reports, curriculum. Sue?
We finally had a meeting. Do you want to touch on anything in the curriculum guide?
Everybody has access to the draft of the guide. A few things have been updated since the meeting, nothing germane to the topics that are involved in the programs that we're offering. Just some minor changes really this year and updates, because this is the first year in 5 that we have not had new course offerings, so we're just more curricular updates. One of the, some minor things that are in there, we talked a lot at the curriculum committee meeting, just in terms of paying attention to math prerequisites and things like that. There's been a lot of discussion among staff and students regarding those prerequisites. We've identified a few updates in music, for example. Music theory is now music foundations and be offered across the curriculum. We have desktop publishing returning to the business department, coming back as graphic design for business. Video game design will take a hiatus for next year as we reimagine that course work for 21-22. We'll be opening up Leaders Mindset, which was a new class we offered for this school year to 9th graders as well. Will be offered at both North and South Campus next year. And just some other minor changes. We added a summer school enrichment offering for art, multimedia art into the summer school offerings. But other than that, all revised, small little minor changes to the course guide this year.
Right.
Still a lot of work.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the 2020-2021 course guide and summer school guide.
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second. Any questions on that? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is discussion action to approve the instrumental music department's wind ensemble trip to New York City.
Staying a little closer to home than some of the other trips lately. Not by the music department, but others. But it looks like a good trip, getting well planned and a lot of interest. So the curriculum committee would recommend approving it.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the trip to New York. Any other questions or any questions? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next meeting is January 23rd?
Yep.
Okay. Right, moving on. Finance and legislation. Craig?
Our last meeting, our recent meeting, was all about the audit for the year. We had a roughly hour-long meeting with the auditor, and the overall sense is that the business office was very helpful and cooperative. We had no significant issues. It was a very positive report. So maybe Jeff would like to add some detail to that, if he wishes.
Yeah, it was another successful audit. We're in our second year of a 3-year contract with Riley, Penner, and Benton as our auditors, and they're just looking at our work throughout the year to be sure that our financial statements are fairly represented, meaning we've accounted for the expenditures correctly and the revenues correctly. And when a potential bidder on our bonds looks at those financial statements, that they're accurate and reflect the financial position of the district, which is extremely good in accordance to the
And you're going to take
rest
credit
of
for
the
all
state.
of that.
I'm going to give credit to
No, I know.
Names on the dotted line.
Mr.
Hey,
Kopecki for
take credit
leaving
now
things
while
in good
it's good,
hands.
you know what you have to live on.
Hopefully I'll be able to take some credit a year from now.
There you go.
But it went very well, so.
All right, I entertain a motion to approve the financial audit report for 2018-2019.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any questions on that? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is discussion and action on the resolution authorizing a taxable tax and revenue anticipated promissory note for cash flow purposes in an amount not to exceed $1.5 million. Cash flow line of credit commitment summary.
Briefly, in the past, we've borrowed money for an entire year, basically, on a fixed rate known in advance. And the difficulty or the maybe slight downside of that is we have the money borrowed for a long time. We're paying interest on that money for a much longer time than we actually need to have, than we actually need to have it borrowed. So at Jeff's initiative, we're looking at a change in that, where we would only borrow money for the time period that we actually need it, where revenues are short, when tax revenues haven't come in yet, and we're still waiting them typically about this time of year, as I recall. So we would pay less interest on perhaps a smaller amount of money, saving us a few bucks. So this is to initiate that new plan. It's kind of like a home equity line of credit for those of you who've ever dealt with those kinds of things.
I'd move that we approve the request for authorization as written.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions on that? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jeff. Craig. Next meeting to be determined. Buildings and grounds did not have a meeting.
No, we didn't have a meeting this time. I'm getting some heat from the curriculum committee
That's
chairman because they finally had a
My
meeting.
committee is so great, though.
Oh, yeah.
Our next-
We're canceling that one, too.
Canceling that one, too?
Even better. All right, moving on to personnel. We have a couple action items. I'll have Laura just explain both of them, but we'll start out with a discussion and action on a proposal for incentive for early resignation, retirement notification for contracted positions as presented in the memo dated today. So Laura can give us some background on that.
Sure. Our administrative team has been discussing for a couple of weeks at least some proposals related to human resources, 2 different proposals. The committee discussed these, and I'll summarize them. And in fact, at your spot, I've put up a 2-sided document that is actually a drafted letter to our faculty members that would explain those. So as I'm briefly reviewing them, that would probably be helpful. So the first proposal that we're looking for discussion and motion or action on tonight would be to provide an incentive for teachers, counselors, psychologists, and administrators. Those are folks in our school district that have contracts. Right now, teachers in the teacher employee group really don't need to inform us they're going to retire or resign until June 15th. That's the date that their contract is due for the next school year. We know there's fewer people going into the field of education right now, particularly teachers, counselors, psychologists, and administrators. And so for an administrator, the deadline is June 30th. For a teacher, it's June 15th. That's really late for us to go out and have the best, strongest candidate pool. So the motivation behind and the purpose behind this proposal is to incentivize those contracted faculty members, if they're going to retire or resign, to let us know earlier so we can go out and hit the job market sooner. So what we're proposing would be if the faculty member submits a letter of resignation or retirement on or before January 15th, talking about the next school year, they wouldn't be coming back. So they're not breaking a contract. They're giving, essentially 7 months notice. If they provide that much advance notice, the district would provide them with $25 for each sick day that's been accumulated in their sick day bank. So if they've used all their sick days, there would be no payout. If they've used none of their sick days, currently our district allows these employee groups to bank up to 80 sick days. So if someone were going to retire, they knew now at the end of the school year they're going to retire. If they let us know by January 15th and they have 80 sick days saved up at $25 a day, that could mean a $2,000 stipend for them as they're leaving and heading into retirement. And then we have a graduated plan. So notice on or before February 15th would be $15 per sick day. By March 15th, $10 per sick day. And by April 15th, $5 per sick day. If an employee has no sick days left, there's no incentive paid out. If they notify us April 16th or later, there would not be any payout. So this is an incentive and actually a new benefit for those faculty members. Since our committee meeting, the committee made a few tweaks In fact, the dollar amounts proposed by administration were actually tweaked a little bit by the committee. And then I did talk with our legal counsel on the topic just to clarify. I shared the memo with him, this letter to the teachers. He said the only thing that the board should be aware of that we didn't discuss in committee is that anything linked to a sick day like that, a payout on a sick day, there's been court rulings that that is considered a vested benefit. So what that means is, let's say the board decides to put this incentive in place and it sits there for 5 years, and then the board at that time decides we want to take this away. You can absolutely take that benefit, you can stop providing that incentive, but those employees, those faculty members, not all employees, the teachers, psychs, counselors, and administrators that are here now and would still be there whenever they resign or retire, we would be keeping track. They would still get that benefit hooked onto their sick days. Where anyone moving forward, if you take out that benefit, it would not apply to them. We don't see that as a problem in keeping track of that. It's just looking at employment dates. But I wanted to be forthright in that was new information that we did not discuss at the committee level. And then the second proposal that's also absolutely linked in terms of incentive to get out to the hiring pool or candidate pool sooner, we currently have liquidated damages that are assessed to faculty members, anyone with a contract, that if they break their contract, liquidated damages are permitted by law to recoup expenses or some of the expenses in terms of hiring a new person. If a teacher turns in their contract on June 15th, or an administrator signs a contract, they finish out the year June 30th, and then later in the summer, they resign. Changed my mind, breaking my contract, not gonna work here anymore. Or even more impactful during the school year, that is negative. That's hard on our students, it's hard on fellow faculty members, it's hard on the district as a whole. And so we instituted liquidated damages a few years back, and in a survey of 26 school districts, we found out we are last or second to the last in terms of how low our liquidated damages are. So we talked about that administratively, we brought that to the personnel committee, we talked about the amounts of those liquidated damages. The personnel committee tweaked the amounts that administration had proposed. We proposed increasing them. The committee proposed increasing, in particular, the notice in August of breaking the contract or the notice during the school year, increased that to even higher. The other change that the committee recommended from our current language would be to remove, you'll see on the bottom of the back side of that sheet, it talks about liquidated damages shall be deducted from the last paycheck or the district will invoice for the amount owed. Liquidated damages will not be levied against a teacher or administrator whose service is severed due to any of the following reasons: an illness or disability of the teacher, or currently it says family member, we'd like to put in immediate family member, induction into the armed forces of the United States, and then under rare circumstances at the discretion of the superintendent. This is what we're recommending. There had been a fourth bullet point that said due to the employment transfer of a spouse. And the committee talked about that's probably not appropriate. First of all, if someone becomes ill, or an immediate family member becomes disabled, or they're going into the military, I mean, those are things that are, going into the military isn't a hardship, but you're suddenly disabled and you cannot work. That's more of a hardship. Transferring because of a spouse, the district is still incurring that cost to hire someone new. And so the committee talked about removing that bullet, and if there's circumstances that warrant it, the superintendent, I can waive the liquidated damage charges, but we don't want it to turn into, it's an employee that lives here in Heartland, my spouse is being transferred to a company in Lake Mills, and we're moving to Oconomowoc, so I'm quitting my job and I'm not gonna pay liquidated damages because my spouse was transferred 10 minutes away. That doesn't seem appropriate.
Okay. Part of our discussion as well, there was another suggestion, and Tim, I don't know if you wanted to bring that one up, your suggestion about how to do the payout versus what's laid out in here?
Well, I guess I'm curious, did Bob Butler offer any insight if we were to detach the incentives from the sick leave? So if we just set fixed, payout amounts and leave the sick leave discussion off the table, is it not a vested right at that point?
It's vested if it's associated with the sick day, because there's been court rulings accordingly.
Right.
I'm not aware of, he didn't mention any court rulings.
I'd be surprised if it were.
I would think, yeah, I'd be surprised as well.
So just quickly doing the math in my head, I guess our worst case scenario at the moment that we shut down this program, if that day comes, is, let's say we've still got approximately 100 staff members, everybody has 80 hours, again, worst case scenario, at $25 an hour, that's $200,000 worth of liability some future board is eating because we allowed that to vest. And so I guess it seems to me that it might be prudent to leave the correlation to sick leave off the table and just say, if you tell us by January 15th, we'll give you $1,000. And if you tell us by March 15th, we'll give you $500, etc. And I'm using arbitrary numbers. I'm not proposing those specific dollar amounts. But if what we're doing by leaving it separate from the sick leave discussion is saving the future school board between $100,000 and $200,000 in committed obligations, seems like a easy tweak to this.
With your idea, would it be like they have to work here a certain amount of years to be?
I mean, we could certainly make it that sophisticated. It hadn't occurred to me to put a qualification period in place. And for our purposes, of course, what we're really doing is we're trading money in exchange for lead time and trying to find a replacement.
Right.
And so from a strictly self-interested perspective, the seniority of the teacher doesn't have any impact at all over our need to get them to give us notice as early as possible.
Right, that's the purpose of this.
And by the way, as I say this, I'm not saying it in any way to be critical of the proposal. I think it's a wonderful and creative way to, get us into a thin labor market as early as possible and find our, high quality replacements so we can maintain the terrific staff we have.
Mm-hmm. I understand your logic as far as committing the board for a future $100,000 to $200,000 possible liability. Where I don't have a problem with it is not every teacher's going to resign the same year. So, if you have a couple teachers a year resign, so I mean that would be spread over a long period of time. So I don't see it has that big of an impact on any individual budget. The one thoughts that I had about this after reviewing it, I was not able to make the personnel meeting money, but the only thoughts I have on it is, we're front end loading it so that again, the main purpose of it is to get as much lead time as we can possibly get. And so when I look at this, I think, okay, that's great. I guess I would take that $25 on the January 15th notice and say, let's bump that to $35. It's an $800 increase in the amount. And I would bump the February and March by $5 to $20 and $15, and I'd get rid of the April 15th one. I don't see the April 15th buys us a heck of a lot, but at least not as much. Again, we're trying to front load it and get as much time as we can. So if that's the case, let's add some incentive to it to help drive those earlier dates. If somebody's going to retire, they're going to know by early in the year that they're planning on retiring, and they're not gonna wait till April 15th in all likelihood and say, I think I'm gonna pull the plug, you know?
At the
Well, some
committee,
have, but
at the committee meeting, administration actually came in with a proposal of $20 for January 15th, and so the committee, with similar line of thinking, recommended bumping that up to $25, so it could be $2,000. And then in terms of the April 15th, cutting that out, that also was talked about. Administratively, we prefer to keep that in. The reason being, if someone, from March 15th until June 15th, when the contract has to be turned in, that's a long time, and that's key hiring time. So if I don't turn in my resignation by March 15th, then why should I bother until June 15th? And then it cuts out a few months worth of time that we could be, if they let us know by April, then we're out in the job market by the end of April rather than the end of June.
with that logic, I'd say fine with them, I'd still leave the $5 and bump the other ones up again, try to front load that, give a little more emphasis to the.
Well, one of the things to keep in mind too, that if we were to approve this, this is just so we can get this started this January. Going forward, this would be part of our handbook. And every year the handbook's reviewed, so if we wanted to change anything connected to the dollar amount or the dates or whatever, we can always do that each April issue whenever we approve the handbook, so.
I mean, right now,
This is kind of just to get it started.
right now there's no incentive, there's no payout at all. So I'm thinking our faculty members will look very favorably upon this, even if it's, I only have 10 sick days left, and I let the district know by, let's say, March 15th, even $100 is $100. It's more than what we're getting now. So we know we're in tough financial times. That probably won't get any easier. So we were trying to put forth a fiscally responsible proposal that also would be an incentive to get out.
We have to remember that it's a high school, especially. Many of our positions are very specialized, and it gets even worse to try to fill some of those, so any advantage that we can do. And I was on a different school, we had a teacher leave the day before school started with a specialized topic. That totally impacted the 7th and 8th grade students for many weeks as we tried to find somebody. And you don't think it'll ever happen, but when it happens, it's awful.
I think if you also look, and I'm sure you've already looked at it, the comparison of what it costs if that employee took the sick day on what the sub costs is. You guys already talked about that.
We did.
$125 or $150.
Right.
And then that could be a week, it could.
Right. It's another part of the cost.
Yeah, we did talk about that, Dave. That was part of the discussion too, like when we were talking about, what Tim was talking about, like a flat fee versus a per day incentive, was to let people manage their account that, you know what, I'm not gonna call in sick today, I'm gonna go to work, knowing that this is sitting out there. If they know they're gonna leave or they're getting close to retiring, other than, the example Laura gave, there was a staff member burned up like 20 sick days in one semester or whatever it was.
In a year.
Or a year, because that person was leaving at the end of the year. Well, that's 20 days that person's not positively affecting their classroom. A sub's in there or overload is in there or something to cover the time. This is just another way of letting an employee manage a perk, basically. But I wanted to make sure Tim was able to share that side of it as well. So,
And I would like to point out, from my experience these last 4.5 years, there are not a lot of faculty members that are going to frivolously burn sick days. In general, they're very honest about using sick days when they're sick or a doctor's appointment, but there can be. I mean, we have 1 or 2 examples of where that was probably misused just heading out into retirement. So if it's linked to sick days, that might prevent the use of some sick days, but we have no evidence that, would say that it definitely would. Our key motivation for proposing this is, again, getting back out to the job market sooner.
Plus, like Bob said, if it gets in the employee handbook and you see how it starts going, you can always adjust it year to year.
Much easier.
If you need to tweak it, yeah, so you might as well get it going and see what happens.
I like it.
All right, so we do have let's take, I think we've had discussion on it. We'll do have a proposal as laid out by Laura with the dates of January 15th, February, March, and April 15th, and then the dollar amounts of 25, 15, 10, and 5. Let's take action on that and see where it goes with that. If we don't get the approval, then we'll go for a second one. So,
May I ask?
Yeah.
Is there time or opportunity to consider Tim's proposal, or is that what we're talking about when we're talking about tweaking it later?
Yeah. Yeah, if this-
I'd be prepared at this moment to make a motion that modifies what's been proposed here.
Okay. So go ahead with your motion then.
Okay, so I'd move that the proposal put before us by administration be adopted as written, except that where the January 15th payout for early notice of termination lists credit for sick leave, we would instead make it a fixed bonus of $1,000 for any employee providing notice on or before January 15th who does not subsequently use more than 5 days of sick leave before the end of the year. I would modify the February 15th proposal to offer a $750 bonus for any individual who gives us notice on or before that date and does not use more than 4 days of sick leave between then and the end of the year. I would modify the March 15th proposal to offer a bonus of $500 for any employee who does not use more than 3 days of sick leave before the end of the year. And for the April 15th deadline, I would propose a bonus of $250 for any employee who gives us notice on or before that date and does not use more than 2 days of sick leave before the end of the year. Otherwise, I would adopt as written with the proviso that sick leave is not a compensable element of this plan, and thus we're creating no vested benefit.
With that, I just have a question on that. Would that go against what our legal counsel is telling us, though, that we're tying any language related to sick time? It seems from what Laura has presented from legal counsel is that does create that situation.
Well, so I would say that I don't know the answer to that. I think I can guess as to what the answer is, but guessing isn't good enough here. Maybe this is something that I either need to withdraw my limitations on the use of sick leave, which I would be willing to do, or we table it and get a recommendation from Bob Butler. I liked one of the incentives that Laura's program created, which was that our departing teachers were given an inducement not to use up 20 days of sick leave in their final months on the job. And I was hoping to reflect that, and I think we can do that, but I don't know.
Do we have a second to Tim's motion?
I don't understand it.
I think the only thing you might not understand is that last comment about tied to compensation and however that was worded, compensable.
Right. So the reason
I'm a lawyer whether I'm in the office or not, I can't help it, okay?
So it makes
And
it
so,
smaller.
for the purposes of the motion, I wanted to make clear in our record that we weren't attempting to create a compensable benefit out of sick leave. We were trying to do exactly the opposite, offering a bonus for the period of time that the rule is in place, that we can rescind at our discretion.
Okay.
But I think the motion had a lot of sick time verbiage in it, that was why I was asking the question, so. Do we have a second to Tim's motion?
Who was the first move?
Tim.
Okay, I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to the motion that Tim presented. Any questions on that?
Well, I'm doing the math on this. So if they've got, on the first one, it's up to $2,000, that would cost the school $2,000. If we do a 1,000 with 5 days of sick time, subs are 100, 110 a day?
115.
115. So that's not gonna quite cost us $2,000, but on February 15th, if it's 750 and they use 4 days, we're over the 1,200. And the same with March 15th with the 500 with 3 days, we're over the 800. So the original one is actually cheaper to incorporate, but it does have those long-term effects down the road, and that I don't like. But the second one is actually gonna cost us more
Without the future liability.
without the future, yes.
Potentially
But with
without future
Assuming
liability.
teachers are using,
those sick days and we have to plan for
right,
subs.
so if they can't use more than 5, you're assuming they'll use 5, or if they can't.
I am
use
assuming
more than
they'll
2,
use
then
5.
Probably safe
Probably,
assumption.
you know, I mean, they might not, but, so I don't know if I'm on board 100% with that,
Okay.
for the costs involved.
Is there verbiage now that they can use when they do retire, that the sick time goes towards
Nothing.
insurance?
Nothing.
Is
There's
it-
no benefit.
No.
Nothing. Okay, so we have a motion, and a second. Any other questions on that? Hearing none, all in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed. All right, motion fails. I would make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the $25, 15, 10, and 5 based on the dates of January 15th, February 15th, March 15th, and April 15th as presented by administration.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions on that? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstain.
We got 2 noes and show of hands for the yeses. All right, motion carries. All right, so that's for the first one. Good discussion, everybody, thank you. And then the next one is discussion and action on the proposal to increase the contractual liquidated damages as presented in the memo as well by Laura.
I'd second that motion.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
I'll make the motion. Tim seconds it. Any questions on that one? No one's probably-
I was just wondering, so I think in this I read that we were near the bottom, or was that the previous?
Right.
proposal,
We
the
were
bottom of
the,
range?
I believe, the second cheapest, or the second lowest liquidated damages.
And it seems like now we're moving to well beyond the highest, or am I misunderstanding that?
We're not well beyond the highest, because I recall there's 8,000 and 6,000.
Okay.
But the 5,000 during the school year is,
I'm
it is
looking-
definitely higher than the average now.
Mhm. Okay, I'm just looking for some clarification. In my electronic version here, I see under the proposal summary that, for example, teachers who provide notice of resignation on report June 15 regarding the following school year, between the student's first and last school day, as an example, it's $5,000 penalty up from $1,000. It seems like a large jump. Is that within the normal range that we have with surrounding schools? I guess that's my question.
So when administration brought this forward to the committee, the $500 liquidated damages proposed for the June 16th to the June 30th, that remained the same. The month of July at $1,500, that remained the same. And those are pretty close to the averages in that chart, that survey chart. And then administration brought the proposal of, for the month of August, I believe we had $2,000, if I remember correctly. And for during the school year, $3,000.
I see.
And the committee talked about it and wanted to boost those higher. So instead of 2,000, go to the 3,000 you see, and instead of 3,000, go to the 5,000 during the school year.
That's, helps me understand. It's not as drastic as I
And it's really about covering your costs. You
Yes.
have to be able to justify that that's not just money that the district is trying to make.
Right, it is not a penalty.
It's not it's not
It's
a
recouping
penalty
costs.
as much as a recouping of all the costs that we as a district would have trying to find somebody in a market where there isn't.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't use that word penalty, I'm sorry.
Okay, but I mean, that, do you understand the
I understand.
connotation of that?
Yeah.
You know, that's,
So on
it's
one
not
hand-
we're out to get the teacher.
Right.
We're like, we have costs
Right.
with all of that.
So to Craig's point, I would say the month of August, if you resign, if you break your contract, I want to make that clear, it's breaking a
Because
contract.
they've signed already.
During the month of August or during the school year, those are significantly higher because right now it's $1,000 for each of those. So there's, could be construed as a negative or a positive, either way, it's significantly higher. On the other hand, in terms of how many faculty members we have that leave during the school year, in the nearly 5 years that I've been here, that's been 2. So it's not a lot of people that do that, but it's very impactful to students, colleagues, the district.
But for any length of time we don't have a teacher that we're contracted to have, we're paying somebody else besides searching and all those costs, so.
And it's noteworthy that there are a list of exceptions where if somebody's suffering an illness or disability themselves or with an immediate family member has to leave for the armed forces or has some other really serious and legitimate reason for departing that the superintendent approves of, then the penalty doesn't apply.
So it's
And
not meant to like get out.
If you sign the contract in June, stick around until the next June and nobody gets penalized.
That's helpful, just to clarify. I have no problem with it.
Yeah.
I do have a question on the induction. So I voluntarily enlist in the service, that counts on it. Induction to me almost sounds like I've been drafted, which we aren't doing. So is the
We
intent-
don't construe that as being drafted, it's,
Somebody just
you're
decides to go in the
deciding to
service.
join the military and you don't always have a choice to say, well, my school year doesn't end until June 12th. They may say, no, you're reporting June 8th.
Well, once you sign the dotted line, we can sign the dotted line, saying not starting until June 12th or whatever. So, I mean, since it's a volunteer service, that's the only question I had was, I mean, I'm not against somebody joining the service, but if it's going to.
So you can imagine a guard or reservist being called up to Afghanistan.
Well, that's a different animal. We're obligated by law to let them go.
Right.
Right.
They may not be resigning.
Right.
Then they have a leave of absence.
Right, and we're obligated to keep that position open for them. So it's a little different when you're voluntarily, it's like taking a new job, the way I look at it, it's just with our Uncle Sam.
Yeah, but when you turn 18, men have to apply for the selective service. So there could be a time, potentially,
yeah,
that somebody could be drafted, because you do have to sign up for selective service. So the likelihood of that happening, it's probably going to be more like you're thinking, that I'm voluntarily going in because I don't want to teach anymore. I want to be an Army Ranger or something like that.
They won't take you on.
I try. I'm an Air Force guy.
You're an Air Force guy.
Smarter.
At least you're not a Marine.
I'm not a Marine, that's for sure. Love the Marines. got that problem. Okay, so any other questions on that?
No.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the liquidated damage changes. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, you guys, great. Policy, Donna, anything?
Nothing.
Nothing. All right, other reports, WASB. They're, in your packet there, you got the resolutions that are going to be proposed at the conference this year, or the convention. If anybody's interested in attending the convention, please let Diane know. She can sign you up for that. CISA, Sue, anything for that? Okay, under new business, we have employee transactions. We have no resignations, but we do have some contracts to approve as part of your board packet as well.
Move to approve the contracts as listed.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any question on those? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is discussion and action to accept donation, which we have a $4,000 donation from the Milwaukee School of Plastic Engineers. That's an annual one. I think we've gotten this before.
I move we
Yeah,
accept.
got it last year.
Second.
I see how to
Do
do
that.
it.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions on that? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, before we go into closed session, I know some of the students left, but I wanted to thank you for coming and presenting your story. Now, you'll notice that we did not have a conversation about that. And I would like to explain why. Because when we do our agendas for our meetings, those are the only things we can talk about in a public meeting. So anything that is presented by the public under that section is the board just takes it under advisement, and then that's why we can't discuss it. We don't want you to feel that we're not listening to you or anything like that. Okay, that's just the way it is. But I also wanted to give you a little bit of a civics lesson in case you've never been to an Arrowhead school board. The Arrowhead school board has 9 board members. 7 of us represent specific elementary schools, middle schools that come to Arrowhead. So there's 7 feeder schools that come to Arrowhead. The only requirement is that if we represent, like I represent the Swallow District, I have to physically live in the Swallow District. But everybody in the Arrowhead district that's an eligible voter votes for us. And then 2 of our board members are called at-large members. And what that means is they can live anywhere in the Arrowhead district. They're not tied to a particular feeder school, okay? So we have 9 board members. Most elected boards like this have an odd number so that when you vote, there's not a tie. Normally it's not a tie unless somebody's missing. We meet once a month as the board like this, but as you saw as we're going through our agenda, we have committees. And the committees usually meet either as needed or certainly once a month on a general term to discuss topics such as building and grounds, curriculum, policy, finance, things like that. Those committees, most of our work gets done at the committee level, and everybody on the board has to serve on a number of committees. And then that information is brought forward to the board as a whole to discuss, like you witnessed some of our discussion tonight on personnel matters or whatever the topic happened to be. So our agenda kind of changes every month, but we always have the committee reports, and in the superintendent report, we have staff or students come in at pretty much every meeting and present to us on things that are going on in the school, which is very beneficial to us as board members because we're not in the schools every day, whereas certainly our staff is, and they're very proud to be associated with you guys, you ladies, and Arrowhead as a whole. So, but in case you were sitting there with glazed over looks, wondering what are they talking about, we wanted to at least give you kind of an idea of what how we operate. So, okay. All right. Now we have to go into closed session, which means you got to leave.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so pursuant to state statute 1985, 1B, C, and E, the board will move into closed session and reconvene to address public business matters. The reason for closed session is a personnel matter.
I move that we move into closed session.
Second.
We have a motion, a second, roll call, starting with Daryl.
Aye.
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 Dave,
Dave, say aye.
say aye.
We're in closed session. Maybe.